Hey, what's up guys, and welcome. And today we'll be doing Super Saiyan 2 Gohan. But what's unique about this video, this is actually a step-by-step tutorial on my complete entire process on how I go from a beginning sketch to the final rendering. I'll also include all the brushes so you can download them and use them as well. I begin with the Ragged Hard Round brush, which is my main go-to brush in all my illustrations. This is a very rough sketch. It's not meant to be pretty, it's just more so meant to get the overall layout of it. Now I enter into the second phase of the sketch, where I lower the opacity, make it blue so I can somewhat see it, and then above it, as you can see here, is where I really refine the sketch to actually make it look like who I'm trying to draw. In this case, Gohan. So I'm at this point, at this part, really just fixing all the rough sketch. The first sketch is not meant to be perfect. This one is meant to refine it while at the same time not be perfect, because I'm not really an inker or emphasize line work as other DBZ artists do. So I'm more so a digital painter. So all of this is just meant to help me get a guide. And this part here, I'm beginning to add the lightning. And the main thing when trying to do the lightning is to try to make it as if it's a part of him and not just on top. And now we enter the third phase. The second sketch, you lower the opacity, make it blue, and on the layer underneath, we begin to do a silhouette. A solid color at 100% opacity. It doesn't have to be perfect, it's just more so just to get a generic area so you can control the highlights and the shadows. And then this is the part where I begin it. Using the Ragged Hard Brown brush, like I said, my main brush, I began to then do the highlights and shadows, emphasizing and establishing where the main light source is coming from. And this one is on the left hand side. So everything that's in front of him is lit up more, everything that's on the side or behind will be in somewhat of a shadow. So in this one, you can see here, my opacity on the top is low, the flow is low. It's more so meant so when digitally painting, you're not trying to do everything solid and complete. You're more so like painting, building upon every stroke, every brush stroke that you do. And at this part, we go back and begin to erase all the extra part of the silhouette. I emphasize, this does not have to be perfect, just good enough, because we'll be going back with color to refine and fix all the edges. And then here for the hair, you get the hairbrush, you get number 1, and then you start to generally draw in the hair. Try to visualize and understand the flow of the hair, where the lighter strands are, the darker strands are, and then you go to hair number 2. And this is the part where you generally try to emphasize the highlights. But keep in mind, you're not trying to draw the hair detailed, you'll be doing that with the color. And now we enter the fourth phase, where we bring life to our drawing. And the way I bring color to Grayscale is the use of gradient maps, as you're seeing here. A gradient map basically changes all the whites, the grays, and the blacks to whatever colors you dictate. I already have saved an existing skin tone, and then after you pick the color, you then just color in the mask to remove the colors where you don't want them to go. And then I repeat this process for every major block of color that is needed, from the skin to the hair to the clothing, etc. I'm adjusting the colors because I wasn't liking how it was looking, adding a background to get a sense of color, and I repeat this process for the clothing. I felt it was a little bit too dark, so I'm adjusting the values here so that the lighter colors pop more. Now using the DC tattoo pack with the rough skin brush, I'm adding a nice texture just lightly, just to add it so he appears more battle damaged. And here's a tip on how to make skin appear more fuller. You create a new layer, make it red, lower the opacity and add a soft light, and there you go. And at this section with the hairbrush number 2, you begin to refine how the hair looks with color. And then I create a new layer for highlights, and this is where I fix all the edges where the highlights exist. So like I said before, you're not worrying too much about edges, because here with color, you correct and modify all those different places while adding the highlights to Gohan's face, as well as the rest of his body. And next we enter the battle damage part of the drawing. Here I'm beginning to add the blood that'll be on Gohan, which is on a separate layer, because at this time I wasn't fully sure how I was going to get or accomplish this. When drawing blood, you can't just have it as solid color. You have to add different tones of the blood, the lighter highlights of the blood, the midtones, as well as the shadows. And then using the Evenant concept brush pack, you select the smoke brush, and that is what I used at this point to create the aurora of Gohan. And then use the standard smudge tool, not having the strength 100% but just slightly below it. You begin to smudge the aurora so it becomes as you see here. I repeat this process, and then you use the motion blur, you adjust the distance and the strength to a point where you like, and I repeat this process to get to a point where I liked it. And now onto the clouds. With that same brush pack, you select cloud number 3, and you very easily can then in color paint in the background as you see here. And then you create a new layer with a light yellow, and you begin to make this what appears to be random lines. In reality, you'll see the purpose of it. You get a motion blur, you adjust the angle and the distance, which is the strength, and it becomes this effect. Use the warp tool because I was angling it to get to a position that I was liking, and then manually you erase the different parts of it that you don't want to cover up of Gohan. Create a new layer and repeat the exact same process, because I'm trying to get to a point where it appears that Gohan is within this sense of power and aurora. And with the smudge tool, like I said, it's used quite often in this. You're smudging it to get to have it look somewhat like this. And then you get the motion blur once again, adjust the distance and the angle, and then you slightly warp it to get to how you want it to go. And then once again, on the third layer, you draw all these thin squiggly lines. You add a motion blur, add the distance so it's quite high, slightly warp it, and now Gohan appears to be within this power up. And now you go back to the character brush pack, you select the fairy dust brush, and you begin to paint it in. I felt that it was a little bit still too dark, so I went back in color to correct his gi to make it more vibrant and more colorful. And at this point, I'm adding the highlights of the aurora. And now the way I draw lightning, with the standard hard round pressure size brush, you begin to just draw in the lightning in different places. The goal of drawing lightning is to try to make it so it's engulfing him or going around him. And then you just add a light blue outer glow. And then to add the details, once again, really lightly in a thin brush, you draw all these different small little lines. Then with the use of a motion blur, just so ever so slightly to add a little bit more detail to it. The purpose of doing these rocks is to add a sense of depth to this drawing, as if he's within this whole environment. You do the highlights and the shadows, all of this is done in color. And then here you do the very final motion blur to make it look like these rocks are really flying in the air. Here is the final completed piece of Super Saiyan 2 Gohan. So tell me guys, what do you guys think? Did you enjoy this step-by-step tutorial process? If you did, why don't you give it a thumbs up? And if you're new here, thank you for watching this video, and why don't you think about hitting that subscribe button so you never miss any new content that I put out every single week. And the total time to draw Gohan was 8.5 hours. If you have any additional questions or comments, feel free to put them down in the comments below. And until the next video guys, Goodbye.